conservative.
Good evening. We're starting tonight with Maseches Pesachim Daf Mem Zayin, and we'll be learning much of Mem Ches Mid Aleph as well. Is that right? Where are we starting? Yeah, that's right. We're learning Mem Zayin and Mem Ches Mid Aleph. We're about halfway down on Mem Zayin and Mid Aleph, starting with Masiv Rav Mari. As some background, we've been discussing a machlokas between Rabba and Rav Chizda as to whether or not we hold of a principle called hoil. Hoil is the theoretical concept of if I could have found a way to be lenient, even if I don't use it now, can I use it now? Yes or no? That was the machlokas there. To find that machlokas, it's 1/3 of the way down in Memvav Beis, and I'll just reread their machlokas because it will be the primer for tonight. And the Brisa says Memvav Beis, a third of the way down. Itmar ha'ofem miyom tov l'chol. If someone cooks from Yantiv to the weekday, Rav Chizda Amar Loke, Rabba Amar Eino Loke, and Rav Chizda held that it was Loke because we don't hold of hoil, and Rabba held that we do hold of hoil. So with that as our background, the Gemara is going to ask a question halfway down Mem Zayin and Mid Aleph. Let's get started. Masiv Rav Mari asks a question from a source in the Tanaim. Shtei lechem, the lechem that was brought on Shavuos. Einan ne'echalos lo pachos mishnayim v'lo yoser al shlosha. It's either eaten on day 2 or on day 3 from the time that it was baked. Ketzad, what are the logistics? Says the Gemara, ne'efos erev yom tov. It's going to be baked on erev yom tov. Ne'echalos yom tov l'shnayim, and that means that on the next day it's going to be eaten. That's 2 days. Very good. Chal yom tov lios achar Shabbos. What happens if Shavuos falls out on Sunday? So then it's baked on Friday. Ne'echalos. It's ne'echalos the yom tov l'shlosha. Then it's eaten on the 3rd day. And that's how we would get today's 2 and 3. The fishe'ena docha lo es Shabbos v'lo es hayom tov, because the halacha is that the baking of the shtei lechem it cannot be done on Yom Tov or Shabbos. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. The Gemara says v'yamris, if what you're saying, Rav Chizda, is true. Rav Chizda yesterday told us an idea that tzorchei Shabbos nasim v'Yom Tov, the mida oraisa. One is allowed to cook from Yom Tov into a Shabbos. Technically speaking, mida oraisa it's allowed. We have a midoraisa that's allowed. We have an isser derabanan in place, and that's overridden by eruv tavshilin, which is how we hold halacha l'maisa. So says the Gemara, "V'yamar tzarchei Shabbos nasim b'yom tov." If according to Rav Chizda it's true that technically speaking, midoraisa one is allowed to prepare for Shabbos on Yontiv, then hashta the Shabbos b'yom tov shari. If we know the midoraisa you can cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, then the Yom Tov b'yom tov mibaya. Then for sure you should be able to cook on Yontiv for Yontiv. Obviously that should be true. Says the Gemara, Shiny Hassam, the case is different. Why do we not allow for the shtei lechem to be cooked, to be baked on Shabbos? Because it's not for you. And the halachos of Meleches Ochel Nefesh only apply when it's for you. Shiny Hassam, Damar Kra Lachem. The halacha is that based on the pasuk is Vayom Arishon Mikra Kodesh, Vayom Hashvi Mikra Kodesh Yeh Lachem. Kol Melacha Lo Yaseh Vahem, Ach Asher Yachel L'Chol Nefesh Hu Levado Yaseh Lachem. Pasuk in Shmos Yud Beis. So because it says Lachem, so when are you allowed to do Meleches Ochel Nefesh? That's when it's for your benefit. But if it's for the Gavoa, then it doesn't work. So Lachem below the Gavoa. And because the Shtei Lechem is for the Gavoa, not for you, so there is no heter of Meleches Ochel Nefesh. So that's how he gets out of that question. Rav Chizda solves that problem rather easily. Okay, but what about according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? Ul Rashbag Damar Mishum Reb Shimon ben Askan Doche as Yom Tov. According to Rashbag, he says it is mutter to do it on Yom Tov, to prepare on Yom Tov for the Shtei Lechem. So my ikal meimar. What then would you say, Rav Chizda? So says the Gemara, Savar la ke'aba shol de amar lachem v'lo lenachrim. He learns the word lachem in a different way. The original shita said lachem v'lo legvoa, and therefore we said that the only isser is going to be the only time we have a heter of meleches ochel nefesh is when it's for you, but not when you're making the shtei lechem for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the other drasha is that of Abba Shaul, and Abba Shaul says, what does the word lachem mean? Lachem v'lo lenachrim. But yes, for gvoa it would still be mutter. So there's a machlokas tanaim how to understand the word lachem. And that influences whether or not we say that the Meleches Ochel Nefesh applies on Yontif for the Shtei Lechem, yes or no. Shalach le Rav Chizda le Rabba. Rav Chizda sent a question to Rabba, Biyad Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. And he did so with a messenger of Rav Acha bar Rav Huna. Mi amrinan hoil. Do we really say hoil? And then says the Gemara, I'll show you why we don't say hoil. Because of the following case scenario, not recommended to do. The Mishnah writes, Yesh choresh telem echad v'chayav olem mishum shmona lavin. There is a person who could plow one mound of the ground, one field, one little piece of earth, and v'chayav olem mishum shmona lavin, and you can violate 8 different lavin. Now remember our question. The question was, do you really hold of hoil? And we'll see why in a moment why that's difficult. Number one, if you are hachoresh b'shor v'chamor, that's a violation of kiloi behema. You're not allowed to have a shor and chamor work the field together. That's kiloi behema. That's isser number one. So you plowed with those animals. V'hein mukdashin. You can't use them because they were mukdash. V'kiloim b'keren. And that which you're plowing is usser because it's two types of vegetation that can't be planted together. Top of Mem Zayin and Beis. And v'shvis, it's a shvis here, and it's b'yom tov. Good job. You're knocking off as many isurim as you possibly can. Kohen v'nazir apesatuma. This is like the perfect scenario of everything wrong. You can get up to 8 different isurim. So says the Gemara, but you said you hold of hoil, but v'iyamrinan hoil. If in fact we would say that we hold of hoil, then something doesn't make sense here. Then acharisha lo l'chayim. If you hold of hoil, then you should not be chayiv on choresh in this case. Why? Hoel v'chazi lekisui dam tzipor. Because in theory, remember what hoel is. It's a theoretical loophole. I don't even have to utilize it. It just has to exist. Theoretically speaking, had I shechted a chicken, I would have a mitzvah of kisui adam, and I could move some dirt around, and I would not violate choresh because it's for the mitzvah of kisui adam. So maybe I wouldn't violate choresh under the circumstances. The only way that works, though, is if you would say hoel. But it says you violate choresh, which means that you don't hold of hoel. It's a good argument because there is a theoretical scenario where you can move the dirt, and that is when it comes to the mitzvah of kisui adam. So that's a good kasha. So answers the Gemara. Amara Papa Bar Shmuel ba'avanim mikur zalos. We're talking about stones that are very sharp and they can't be used for kisui hadam. So your question falls away. Says the Gemara, but ru'uyos lakoshan. But I could still crush them. I could still grind them up. Really, you can grind up stones on Shabbos? Ask the Gemara, really? Uktisha b'yom tov mishari? How can that be? Says the Gemara, there is a way to do it. It's ru'uyos lakoshan kala achar yad. Midoraisa, technically speaking, I could, in a kala achar yad way, I could grind them up in a kala achar yad way, in which case the question is back on the table, which is, do you hold of hoel or do you not hold of hoel? Says the Gemara, no. The case that we're dealing with the plowing on the ground is bitsunma. It's with rock. The ground is not soft at all. It's nothing that can be used for kisui adam. Says the Gemara, that's not possible because we're talking about kiloi hakerem. We said we're talking about things that actually growing vegetation. Vegetation doesn't grow out of rocks. Tsunma barzriya. You're going to tell me that your rock formations can grow things? That's not the case. Says the Gemara, well, really, tsunma milamala. The top layer is dirt, is rock, and v'afar tichuach milamata, and it's very soft dirt underneath. So it says the Gemara, well, good. Then v'tepokle mishum afar tichuach. Then we should have said that a person could have dug to get the afar tichuach to do kisui adam. The haraya that it must be that you don't hold of hoel. Says the Gemara, okay, let's try and find a better answer than this case that we answered here with the avanim mikorzalos. Elo amar mar ba ravashi betina. We're talking about clay, but a very liquidy type of clay that's not meant for growing anything. That's what Rashi points out on the side. Betina bar zriyahu. What are you talking about? You're saying that it's not roi for kisui adam because it's tina, because it's very liquidy type of clay. How can that be? But we said we were talking about a case of kiloi hakerem. That was what the Mishnah was talking about when it said you violate 8 isurim in a row in one moment. Says the Gemara, betina bar zriyahu. No, it's bimasunsa. We're talking about a little bit of a thicker form of clay that is a good version of growth. However, it's not susceptible for kisui hadam. It's not wrong word. It's not usable for kisui hadam because it's not dirt. It's not dirt. It's actually some type of clay, which you cannot use for kisui adam. Problem solved. We're about a quarter of the way down Mem Zayin and Beis. The Gemara is going to continue with another question. Eisve Abaye. Abaye asks the following question. Eisve, always from the Tanaim. And here, this is the Gemara in Beitza. The Gemara asks as follows. Check that out. You cook a gid hanoshe with milk on yontif and you eat it lo kechamesh. You violate 5 isurim. What are they? Lo mishum mevashel gid biyom tov. Right? Why is that an isur d'oraisa? Because you can't eat it. So your cooking has no value. Good. V'lo mishum ochel gid. The gid hanoshe is itself an isur d'oraisa. V'lo mishum mevashel basar b'chalav. Just cooking basar b'chalav is an isur d'oraisa because the Torah says lo vashel gid b'chalav 3 times. Once for bishul, once for achila, once for hana. The loke mishum ochel basar b'chalav, separate iser, right? So we're up to number 4. And last but not least, veloke mishum havar. Those are the 5 isurim. So says the Gemara, v'i amrinan hoel. Had it been that we really said hoel, Had it been that we really use these theoretical loopholes, then ahavara lo lechayev. It should have been the case that you shouldn't have been in violation of havara, of lighting a fire, because I easily could have lit that fire for myself. So the fact that I lit it for something else is not relevant. I shouldn't be chayiv midoraisa for that. I shouldn't be chayiv malkos. So why is this the fifth of the isurim in this case, where someone cooked the gid hanashe on Yom Tov and ate it? Why? I don't understand. It shouldn't be an isur doraisa if you hold a four-wheel. Amar le, you're right. Apik havara, from the list of the five, we need to remove havara as one of them. The ayil gid hanasha shel nevela, and we need to replace it with the gid hanasha, not of a regular animal, but that of a nevela, a different animal that's not shechted properly. Says the Gemara, that can't be, because look at the type of isser that we're replacing. Havara is a question of how you cook it, but nevela is a question of achila. And that's what the Gemara picks up on right here, 2/3 of the way down. Vatani Rav Chia, no. Rav Chia looked at this Mishnah, at this Bryce actually, and he said, of the 5 Isurim, here's how they're broken down. Loken shtaim al achila. So 2 of them have to do with achila. Vishalosh al bishulo. And 3 of the 5 have to do with how you cook it. But the Isa, if you're going to replace Havara with Nevela, then you've shifted the balance from 2 on achila and 3 on bishul, to 3 of them on achila and 2 on bishul. That the Gemara says can't happen. The Isa, if you do switch havara for gid anasha shel nevela, then shalosh al achila semibayle. Then 3 of the isurim are now on achila, because one of them was havara, which is how to cook it, and you switched it to nevela, which is an isur of achila. So that doesn't work out according to Reb Chia. Therefore, says the Gemara, a second possibility. What is the second possibility of the isser of havara? We have to replace it. So says the Gemara, we're 2/3 of the way down. Apik havara. Yes, we should still remove havara from the list of the 5 things of when a person cooks gid anashe on Yom Tov in milk. So says the Gemara, apik havara ve'ayil atse muktzah. Put muktzah, put wood in there. That's muktzah. That should be the 5th isser doraisa. The question should be ringing off of our ears. Muktzah is not an isser doraisa. So asks the Gemara, muktzah doraisa who? Answers the Gemara, yes, it is. Amar le in muksa is an isur deraisa. Wow, that's a little bit of a wild shita. We certainly do not paskin that way. Didn't hold it at all. Right. Shimon less than muksa, but we actually learned then there were some minor applications, but not the way we keep it. But here, this is intense. Yeah, that's a very intense shita, and in fact, the Gemara proves itself to chsiv, because the Gemara brings a pasuk, a reference of preparing, and it's rooted in the Yisr Doraisa of Milosa Se Kol Melacha. We see that it's in Yisr Doraisa. Amar Le, he says back to him, no way. You yourself told me in the following frame, you asked a question from Rav Chizda, some say you asked from Rav Huna. Normally they had the korbanos hatamid all prepared, ready to go. But let's say that you brought one out from the field. It was not muksa, it was not huksa lemitzvaso. That tamid, that korban tamid was not, it wasn't a korban tamid, it was a regular animal that was walking around. You're like, oh, we need this for a korban tamid, let me go grab that from the field. So says the Gemara, is that even allowed to happen? Are you allowed to take a korban tamid that's not checked? Normally we have 4 days of preparation. We make sure there's no mumin. We make sure there's no blemishes. So what's the din in this case? You take an animal that's grazing out in the field. You said the following drasha. I'll read the pasuk and then we'll analyze many parts of the pasuk. The pasuk reads, it says a pasuk in Yechezkel. The pasuk reads, it says, V'seh achas minatzon. 1 seh from the tzon, from the sheep, minha from the animals, minha masayim, from the 1 and 200s, mimashke Yisrael, from a liquid that Yisrael can drink, lemincha ulaolo shlamu lechaper alehem num Hashem Elokim. So we have to figure out what this pasuk is talking about. So here are all the drashas that are relevant to us. Seh, when the pasuk in Yechezkel says seh, it teaches us about a korban tamid below habechor, that it doesn't apply. You cannot use a bechor for the tamid korban. Achas, what does the word pasuk mean when it says the word achas? It says se achas. It means below meiser. It can't be the 10th one. It has to be one of the 10, but not the 10th one. You can't use a meiser for the korban tamid. Min hatzon, it has to be from tzon. Below min hapalges. The palges was an animal that was in development between the stages of keves and ayil, and because but in between the stages of keves and ayil, so therefore it's not eligible for a korban. Turning to the top of Memches Amud Aleph. Says the Gemara, min hamasayim. Rashi here points out we're switching gears now. Korchach and Esachim. Koi Rashi says we're talking about the wine libations that were used in the mikdash for korbanos. Mimosar Mimosar shtei meos shenishtai rubabor. We're talking about something that is an appropriate measure of 200s. Let's say that a little bit of orla falls in, but the ratio is greater than 200. We're good to go. Mikan la orla shebitela b'masayim. Now let's say you have 205 units of good wine, and 1 unit of orla falls in. The halacha is that it's still fine. It's a 1 and 200 ratio. This has nothing to do with our needs for the Gemara, but we are finishing off the Brisa. It's not a Brisa. We're finishing off an analysis of the pasuk here, but it says the Gemara either way. Mimashke Yisrael, it has to be a drink. Mina mutter Yisrael, has to be a drink. It has to be wine that can be used by Jews. Mikan amru ein mevin nesachin min tevel. You can't bring wine libations on the mizbeach if they are tevel, if they have yet to be tithed. And then says the Gemara, this is where we come back to our topic. Yachol lo yavi min muksa. Maybe we should have thought you are not allowed to bring an animal from muksa. Amris, here's the svara. So why not? Ma tevel miyuchad she'isur gufo garam lo. What's the reason why the wine didn't work when it was tevel? It's be'etzem problematic. That food is usur to eat. Av kol she'isur gufo garam lo. This is true of all things that have an inherent isur, which you cannot use. Yatsa muksa she'ein isur gufo garam lo, ela isur davar acher garam lo. But muksa is not inherently usur. Muksa on a Tuesday is fine. Orla on a Tuesday is not fine. But there's no muksa on a Tuesday. That's exactly what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara says that which is precluded from being in the Parshas HaTamid and being used as for the Korban Tamid has to be something which is inherently problematic. Muksa is not inherently problematic. It's only a problem on Saturdays. Otherwise, it's mutter. So that's what the Gemara says. You might have thought, Havamina, that maybe we would assume that you cannot bring muksa. Says the Gemara, Yatsa muksa. It's not true by muksa. She'ein isur gufo garam lo, ela isur davar acher garam lo. It's only because of Shabbos that it's asur. But really, there's nothing wrong with muksa. There's nothing wrong with the animal. It's only the context in which the animal's found, which is Shabbos, and we didn't prepare that animal for the Korban HaTamid. So says the Gemara, V'i amris isur muksa de oraisa. If you really hold that muksa is a din de oraisa, then I don't understand. Mali isur gufo, mali isur davar acher. The distinction of an isur gufo, an inherent problem like orla, like a food that like tevel, that's an inherent problem. You cannot make that distinction on a Torah level. That's not the way that it works. You can make the distinction on a rabbinic level, that there's a difference between that which is inherently usur like orla and tevel versus that which is only contextually usur like muksa. Because again, on Friday and on Sunday, there's no problem with the muksa. It's just on Saturdays that it's a problem. On Shabbos, says the Gemara, you cannot hold that muksa is deoraisa. And furthermore, we have another problem with this Gemara, and that's as follows. Says the Gemara 10 lines down, Ha'atu da'amris, you said chiluk malachos l'Shabbos ve'ein chiluk malachos b'Yom Tov, that on Yom Tov itself we don't distinguish between different isurim that are done. It should be only lumped into one isur. So no matter what, this shita is very difficult to understand, and therefore we turn to our third issue, our third possibility of replacing havara. Remember what we're talking about is that we have a case whereby a person who cooks gid hanasha in milk on Yom Tov and he ate it would get 5 isurim. And we said it can't be that havara is one of them. It must be that you don't hold of hoil, because if you held of hoil, havara would be mutter. So we tried 2 approaches as what to switch out havara with. Here's approach number 3. Says the Gemara, la epuk havara va'ayel atzei ashera. We should remove the word havara, the isser of havara from the 5 in the case of the gid hanashet. That's no longer one of the 5. The ayel, and we should replace it with atzei ashera, that the wood that you're burning is atzei ashera. Va'az harase, the actual formal warning that there's an isser lav in malkos, that's what the word azhara means here, that you're being warned formally by the Torah, mehacha, is based on the pasuk v'lo yidbak b'yadcha me'uma min acherim, that you're not allowed to benefit from it at all. Fine. So says the Gemara, that doesn't work either, because if you say that it's atzei ashera that replaces havara, then we wouldn't have 5 isurim. We'd have 6, because there's a secondary isur that comes about when you use the atzei ashera. Amar le Ravacha b'rei de Rava le'abaye v'nilke nami mishum v'lo savi toivel beisecha. There's a secondary. This is a reference to an isur hana, that you're getting hana from the atzei ashera. That's for sure not allowed. It's for sure not allowed. So if that's the case, says the Gemara, that should be a second isur d'oraisa, not only the usage of, but the hana of, and that would not be 5 isurim. You can't replace havara with atzei ashera, because that would lead us to 6 isurei d'oraisa and not 5. So that doesn't work either. And therefore the Gemara concludes by its final answer, and then we will continue with a connected topic. Ella, says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down. What's our last answer? Remember the 5 isurim? We're talking about the 5 isurim when you cook gid hanasha with chalav on Yom Tov and you eat it, says the Gemara, la'api kavara v'ayel atze hektish. What we're talking about as the fifth Isser is atze hektish. Now, the most important thing that we're talking about here is once you remove havara from the 5 Isurim, the whole question falls away. What we were trying to do is to ask on the opinion that says that there's no hoil. Because if we have havara, then there's no reason why you can't say hoil. So the Gemara is saying, you're right, it wasn't havara, it's another Isser. So here's the final answer. There's the wood of hektish. Here's the Isser deoraisa source about utilizing hektish in the wrong way. It says, and that's the pasuk. So fine, we solved our question against the shita that held that there's hoil, and let us continue with the Gemara. We're about 6-7 lines into the wide lines. Amar Rami Bar Chama. We had actually learned 2 different sets of machlokos. We learned about Rabba and Rav Chizda, machlokas of whether or not we hold hoil. We also saw one in the Tanaim, and we saw this machlokas Tanaim, and we're not sure as to whether or not they're the same. So Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Hadir Rav Chizda v'Rabba machlokas Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yoshua. Maybe we should say that the machlokas between Rabba and Rav Chizda, one holding that we say hoil and one holding that we do not, that is the same as the machlokas of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua. The Rabbi Eliezer savar amrin and hoil. Rabbi Eliezer was of the opinion that we say hoil. Rabbi Yoshua savar lo amrin and hoil. Maybe we should compare Rabba and Rav Chizda to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. So the Gemara presents 2 rejections to this comparison, and here is rejection number 1. Amar Rav Papa, the Dilma Adkan Lo Kama Rabbi Eliezer Hasam Dermin and Hoil. Maybe the only time Rabbi Eliezer says that there was Hoil is Ela de Beidna de Ka'aile Litanura Kol Chad V'Chad Chazile Lididei. When you're putting in all the loaves of bread, and you haven't been mafresh yet, any one of those could have been mutter to you because it could have been that the truma was a different loaf than the one you're looking at. So therefore, it always could have been mutter. Therefore, he says hoil over there because they're all chazi le'ledidei. Aval hacha, in our case of the orchin, de l'orchin hu de chazi le'didei lo chazi. He already ate dinner, the Meforshim point out. So therefore, the food's not even relevant to him. Therefore, maybe in such a case, and therefore the cases are not comparable. That's rejection number 1 as we try to compare the machlokas of Rabbi and Rav Chizda to the machlokas of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. And Amar Rav Shisha Berei Rav Idi, he says that there's another reason why you can't compare Rabba and Rav Chizda to the world of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, because, says the Gemara, the Dilma Lohi, maybe the comparison's not a good one. Adkan Lo Ka'amar Rabbi Yoshua Hasam to Lo Amrinan Hoil Eladika Chada de Lo Chazia Lo Ladideva Lo Orchan. Maybe Rabbi Yoshua would say that the only time that that the reason why we don't say hoel is because it's truma and it's fit for no one. Lola di devil orchan, for nobody. Aval hacha dechazi mihas laorchan. Here, maybe the people could actually eat something, even if you can't. The people can eat something. Ema hachanami amrin and hoel. Maybe they would agree. So the Gemara says that we cannot compare the 2, but that led to a problem because when this story was repeated in front of Rav Yirmiyah and Rav Zera, Amrura Rabbanan commented Rav Yirmiyah and Rav Zera. Rav Yirmiyah kibla. Rav Yirmiyah actually did accept the comparison between Rabba and Rav Chizda to the similar machlokas with Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Zera lo kibla. He did not accept it. So Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah le Rabbi Zera. Milsa de kashilan va'asi kama shane b'mai pligi Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yoshua. We've been fighting about this for years. The comparison between Rabba and Rav Chizda and Rabbi Eliezer. We never understood where the machlokas came from. We finally have pshat hashta amru mishmei de gavra Rabba. Now we have in the name of it started out in the name of Rami Bar Chama who made this comparison. Now that Rami Bar Chama is saying this, he's the gavra Rabba below nikbala. Why are you not willing to accept the comparison? Maybe it's taka true that Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer are the predecessor, they're the progenitors of the shita of Rabba and Rav Chizda. So says the Gemara, Amar le, heichi akbala. How can I possibly accept this? The Tanina, we have a brisa that says, Amar le Rabbi Yoshua lidvarecha harei over mishum lo sasa kol malacha v'shasik le. There's a brisa that says that they said to Rabbi Yoshua that according to your shita, you're going to violate the malacha of lo sasa kol malacha, and he didn't even respond. So how can I say that it all works out? He didn't even respond. He left the question hanging, which shows that he seemed to not have an answer. The Isa, if in fact it's true what he holds, then lema le taima didi mishum hoel. Then he should have said, no, I hold of hoel. That's why it's not an Isser Doraisa. Why didn't he say that in the Brisa? So by his silence, we learned his shita, and therefore I can't say that the comparison is correct. He must not really hold of hoel. Amar le, they said back to him 2/3 of the way down, and with this argument we will close. Amar le l'ta'amech, and according to you, hadetani nebibraisa, that which we learned in the Brisa, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva l'dvarecha harei over mishum by Rabbi Matzeh. Someone said to Rabbi Eliezer, wait a minute, according to you, you might violate by Rabbi Matzeh v'shasik le, and he said nothing. Hachanami delo ahader le, he didn't give an answer at all. So says the Gemara, there was an answer actually given to this, just not in the same location. It wasn't in the Brisa. His answer was shown later in a Mishnah, maybe even earlier. We don't know when the Brisas were written exactly. Ditznan, what did it say in our Mishnah on the top of Mem Vav Amud Beis? There we said this line, Lo zehu chametz shemuzharna la mishum ba'ira ba'im atzeh. This is not the concern. But why didn't he say that in the Brisa? But this works. This answer works. Maybe the answer does work. He just he was quiet in the Brisa and he gave a real answer in the Mishnah. Maybe the same is true here. And maybe he would give his answer in another location, and maybe it really still is comparable. So the Gemara, we'll pause here, but the Gemara is a little unclear as to whether or not, as to really why Reb Zera was having a hard time accepting Rami Bar Chama's comparison of the machlokes between Rabba and Rav Chizda in the Amoraim and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua in the Tanaim. And we will stop here at Tanya. Rebbe Omer will pick up on Shabbos Im Yirtzeh Hashem from the bottom of Maseches Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
5 after 9.